What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Getty Group Sports Basketball. Today I am going to be filling out my March Madness bracket. So let's start it off with the West region. I think that it's a no-brainer for all these 1 seed and 2 seed games. It's going to be the lower seed technically. Gonzaga beats whoever wins that play-in game, which I expect to be Appalachian State. 8 versus 9 seed, every game for this type of seeding is tremendous, and I'm going to be watching every single one of them. Oklahoma, I'm surprised to find them as an 8 seed. Missouri, they're a solid team on both sides of the ball. I'm going to give this one to Oklahoma, mostly because I thought they were going to be a 5 or a 4 seed. Creighton versus UCSB. I'm going to pick Creighton here. I think that Creighton could definitely make a far run in the tournament, as long as they don't play like they did against Georgetown. Horrible showing. Marcus Zagorowski is a tremendous player. I think he always has and he always will carry the Creighton Blue Jays. Next up, Virginia versus Ohio. I hadn't heard of Ohio until they won their tournament game or their division championship, so I'm going to give this one to Virginia. This is going to be a great playing game on Thursday. Wichita State and Drake. I think that Wichita State is going to win it and advance into the tournament, but I think Evan Mobley and USC will, from there, take care of business. Kansas versus Eastern Washington. This is a no-brainer. Kansas is going to win that game. Oregon versus VCU. This is where my first upset is going to come into play. I think VCU is definitely that one team that could be a Cinderella story, and Oregon hasn't been as strong in these past couple of games in the Pac-12 tournament. Iowa over Grand Canyon, pretty obvious pick with Luka Garza and all that. In the East Division, we have the playing game between Mount St. Mary's and Texas Southern. I'm going to go with Michigan getting the win here. LSU and St. Bonaventure. St. Bonaventure, like LSU, I think is very overrated, and St. Bonaventure is very underrated, and I think St. Bonaventure gets the win. Colorado versus Georgetown. Georgetown had that tremendous run in the Big East tournament and ended up winning the Big East tournament. But Colorado is too good with McKinley Wright as their leader of their team. UNC Greensboro over an overrated Florida State team. I'm going to take Florida State here. I just can't see Greensboro beating them, even though Florida State is highly overrated. Michigan State versus UCLA. I think that Michigan State's absolutely going to take care of business over UCLA. If Michigan State wins this play-in game, then they're going to beat UCLA or BYU, so I'm going to have them advancing. Texas over Abilene Christian. Uconn versus Maryland. Uconn with James Bouknight has been crazy good this season. Very, very underrated. I think they might be able to upset Alabama here in the next round too. Continuing on with the round of 64 in the South Division. Baylor getting an easy win over Hartford. This is a great game, North Carolina, Wisconsin. I do think that North Carolina should be an 11 or a 10 seed. I don't think that they deserve that 8 seed at all, which is why I'm going with Wisconsin here. Villanova, of course, they have Colin Gillespie out with an injury. Winthrop, I think, is a team that could definitely pull off the upset here, but I'm going to go with Villanova. Purdue versus North Texas. I think Purdue wins that one pretty easily. Texas Tech versus Utah State. I think that Utah State was very strong in the Mountain West. Texas Tech had a bit of a lackluster season, but then again, they were playing in one of the top 2 best divisions in college basketball. I'm still going to give this one to Utah State, though, pulling off the upset. Arkansas over Colgate, no-brainer. Arkansas has been tremendous this year. I wish they won that SEC championship. I was rooting for them. Virginia Tech, I think that they are very, very underrated. They are a very good team. I think that they are going to pull off the upset over Florida. Ohio State over Oral Roberts. I've never heard of Oral Roberts, so that's not a good thing for them. Midwest region, the final games of the round of 68. 1 seed over the 16 seed, of course. Loyola, Chicago, and Georgia Tech. This is probably the best 8 and 9 matchup we've seen. Loyola, Chicago, of course, they had that Cinderella story a couple years ago, and they have their best team they've had in a long time. But Georgia Tech, They won the ACC. They're the hottest team in college basketball right now. I think they upset Loyola Chicago. Tennessee versus Oregon State. Oregon State really doesn't deserve to be in this bracket. Tennessee gets the win. Oklahoma State versus Liberty. Cade Cunningham as a dynamic playmaker, and when he's on his game, he is probably the best player in college basketball, and I think he's going to be on his game through the entire tournament. San Diego State versus Syracuse. San Diego State, very overrated. I'm surprised they even won the Mountain West. I'm going to give this one to San Diego State because I don't think Syracuse deserves even a spot in the tournament. West Virginia over Morehead State. It's a pretty easy one to predict. Clemson's another team that doesn't really deserve a spot. They've had their ups and downs, but Rutgers, I think, is the better team. Houston over Cleveland State, pretty easy one there. Back to the West Division where we are in the round of 32 now. Gonzaga is going to be very hard to beat, and it's going to take a lapse in their game for them to lose to any team in this bracket. Creighton over Virginia. I love Creighton in that matchup. I don't think that Virginia really has a chance against Creighton with Marcus Zagorowski. Kansas versus USC. I think Evan Mobley is a great playmaker, but Kansas with the experience and the overall better team gets the win. Iowa's not going to lose to VCU or Oregon. I think that they are a given to go to the Sweet 16. Michigan versus St Bonaventure. This is one of those games where I could see Michigan falling out of the bracket, but they are going to advance. Florida State, as I said earlier, is overrated, and Colorado is a really good team, so I'm going to give Colorado the win. Michigan State versus Texas. I think Texas will still advance over Michigan State or UCLA or BYU. They've got a pretty easy ride to the Sweet 16. Here's where the first major upset comes in. Uconn over number 2 Alabama. I think Uconn is a tremendous team, and Alabama, although they had a great showing against LSU, they still almost lost to LSU. That's not impressive. Uconn gets the win. Baylor versus Wisconsin. Both teams very good on the scoreboard. Baylor is better still, and they have the best defensive team in the country. I'm going to give it to them. Villanova versus Purdue. I think Purdue is very underrated, but Villanova with the experience will pull through. Utah State versus Arkansas. I love Arkansas in this matchup. I don't think there's a way they can lose. Texas Tech, if they do advance to the round of 32, could be a bracket buster for me, but I don't think that they will. Virginia Tech and Ohio State. I think this is going to be a much better game than people expect, but Ohio State will still get the win. Illinois versus Georgia Tech. Yes, Georgia Tech is red hot, but Illinois with Ayo Dosunmu is definitely the better team, and they are going to get that win. The 4 seed beats the 5 seed in a great matchup, Oklahoma State and Tennessee. Cade Cunningham pulls through again. This is where West Virginia, I think they are very overrated. They didn't have great showing against any top 25 teams, so I think San Diego State manages to get into the Sweet 16. And here I think that Houston, they've had a pretty rough couple of wins the past few games, aside from the championship game against Cincinnati. I think Rutgers gets the job done and pulls off the upset. Gonzaga over Creighton. This is where Creighton run ends because Gonzaga is just too good of a team to lose to Creighton. Kansas and Iowa. This is going to be a crazy good game. Luka Garza will pull through, and I don't like having 1 versus 2 matchups in the Elite 8 because it's probably not going to happen, but in this case it will. Michigan versus Colorado. This is where Michigan falls off, and Colorado, carried by McKinley Wright, gets the win. Texas versus Uconn. There is no 2 seed here, which probably isn't going. There's probably going to be a 1 or a 2 in this Elite 8, but for me it's going to be a 3 versus 5 matchup in Colorado versus Texas. Baylor versus Villanova. This is where Colin Gillespie's absence really starts to hurt Villanova against a tremendous team like Baylor, and they get the win. Arkansas versus Ohio State. Although Arkansas is a really good team, Ohio State gets the win. Again, a 1 versus 2 Elite 8. Illinois versus Oklahoma State. Big 12 teams winning continue. That seems to be the train going on. And I think that Illinois, their luck kind of runs out. I'm not saying that their whole entire season was lucky. I'm saying that certain games, like the Georgia Tech game, were lucky. San Diego State and Rutgers. I think Rutgers' Cinderella story continues. San Diego State, I didn't like them in their round of 64 matchup, much less their Sweet 16 matchup. So I'm going to have Rutgers advance to the Elite 8. Gonzaga versus Iowa. We saw this matchup earlier. Iowa just looked shell-shocked at how bad they were beaten. I think that happens again. Gonzaga gets the win. Colorado versus Texas, a 5 versus 3 seed. I think that Texas is going to be too much for Colorado to handle. Of course, they did handle Michigan, but Texas, I think, is a better team than Michigan. Baylor versus Ohio State. This probably was one of the easier Elite 8s for Baylor, and I think they're going to advance to the Final Four. And this is whoever wins is going to be a bit of surprise. I'm going to go with a Big 12 team, Oklahoma State with Cade Cunningham. And Rutgers, a bit of luck was definitely needed to make it to the Elite 8. Their luck finally runs out. My Final Four consists of 2 1 seeds in Gonzaga and Baylor, a 3 seed in Texas, and the 4 seed Oklahoma State. Gonzaga is going to be too much for Texas. Oklahoma State did beat Baylor in their Big 12 playoff matchup, but that's not going to happen again. It didn't happen in the regular season. Baylor, with the best defensive team and one of the top 5 best offensive team, advances to the national championship. And the matchup we have all been waiting for, the matchup that was supposed to happen towards the beginning of the season but was canceled due to COVID, Baylor versus Gonzaga, the 2 best teams in the country. I'm going to go with Baylor here. I think that their defense is what sets them apart from Gonzaga. Yes, Gonzaga puts up massive points, but they have never played a big-time Big 12 team like Baylor. My tiebreaker final score, I'm going to go a bit of a low-scoring game, 69-58.